Okay, and we should now be live. Alrighty, so we'll go ahead and see how the recording pans out. Hopefully, it didn't catch 20 minutes of me clacking on my keyboard working on pull requests before we got started here. So maybe I'll have to go and edit that and post. But otherwise, we're ready to go. So today's meeting, we're going to try to keep it much briefer than last time since we're not going over roadmap as much as we are kind of going over work that's been done really over the past month. And in particular, since our last sort of behind closed doors team meeting where we planned a sprint, just to kind of show you what we came up with on December 14th. Our top priorities as far as issues have gone, obviously we have sort of a normal amount of like bug triage we have to do during every single sort of Akka.NET sprint. But the big issues that we've been trying to tackle in particular, the idle CPU performance has been a big one that both Andrew and I have been looking into, as well as a couple of other members of our community, such as Zetanova, for instance. We've been looking at that. Andrew contributed the first version of his Akka.persistence.link to DB edition, which is meant to be kind of a reimagining of how to do all of the Akka.persistence.SQL plugins. It's meant to be much higher performance than what we have now. And it's also designed to kind of be a replacement for Akka.persistence.SQL.common. So it can be a common middleware for anything that supports the sort of ODBC driver support, which I believe is what connects to link to DB. Is that correct, Andrew? Did I get that right? Oh, okay. Oh, okay. Well, I did not know that. Well, that's good to know. We talked about the DI rewrite, which is basically trying to add better support for Microsoft.common.extensions inside Akka.NET, in particular the DI extensions, and then the Akka management repo, as well as some work on Artery and the Akka streams transport, and a couple of other bits and pieces here. This is what we discussed sort of over the past couple of weeks. Now, we're going to go ahead and take a look at our sprint board. So this is what we use to go ahead and try to organize each one of our sprints. We put up a number of issues, some of which are marked as help wanted, meaning that we're kind of open to accepting input from the community. Well, actually, let me phrase that a bit better. We are looking for help from the community to get a couple things done. And the issues that we try to select with these little help wanted labels right here tend to be ones where the issues don't require a tremendous amount of domain knowledge with Akka.NET. So, for instance, doing something like the work Gregorius is doing on Akka.NET 1.5 with the Akka.remote.artery envelope buffer pool, that requires knowing a bunch about the internals of how Akka.remote works today and how Akka.remote is going to work once Artery is released. It also requires knowing a lot of Akka streams. That's an issue that would be very compelling for someone who's had a chance to familiarize themselves with the Akka.NET codebase. But if you're a beginner just starting out, that's kind of a lot to chew off all at once. So other issues such as fixing this null reference exception or fixing this sort of nullability problem in here, these are the sorts of things that a person who's interested in contributing to Akka.NET but hasn't had that much experience yet, that's something that they could reasonably do if they wanted to. So we're going to try to get to the habit of including more of these types of help wanted issues in each of our 2-week sprints that we do. So let's see how well things are going so far. So we have, if I take a look at the done column here, link to DB. So the first version of that is inside its own repository. We have not set up CI for it, and we have not deployed a version to NuGet just yet. So let me go ahead and put down here. So we'll go ahead and talk about Akka.persistence, SQL, link to DB. First, I guess first PR with all v1 code. Need to do CI and first release. So we still need to do that, but we got all the code merged in. And I believe you got a chance to get some feedback from Ishmael and a couple other people in the community, right, Andrew? Oh, yeah. Well, I'm sure he'd be interested in that since he's the developer behind our Oracle Akadot persistence support right now. So that'd definitely be in his wheelhouse. So yeah, I'm sure he'd be interested in doing that. That's one thing we got done. This other change related to Akadot persistence for adding that missing timestamp property. This is meant for like observability purposes for people who want to go and query data from Akadot persistence query based on when it was written. That's what this is meant for. It's not meant for sort of the canonical operation of Akadot persistence itself. So that's been merged in. I've got another pull request waiting to go down here that Ishmael's reviewed that fixed a couple of bugs. We weren't using UTC for the timestamp here, which means that we would have all sorts of fun daylight savings issues and stuff like that. So I fixed that, and I think a couple of other little issues down here. This is going to be a bit of a breaking change for Akka.NET 1.4.14. It means that every single Akadot persistence plugin is going to need to be recompiled in order to take in this update. I tried to avoid that down here, but as it turns out, because the constructor that we use for the persistence class in Akadot persistence, because it uses so many optional parameters, it's basically not really feasible to go and add another new optional parameter to that at the moment. So we kind of painted ourselves into a corner with the way that's designed. So it's not going to be a breaking code change, but we do need to recompile all those plugins against the new version of this persistence class. So I wish we could avoid that, but unfortunately, is what it is. So we're going to need to go ahead and just basically push out some updates to all of our Akadot persistence plugins not long after that goes live. I'm hoping to do Akka.NET 1.4.14. If we don't do it, let's say this week, because it's Christmas and everyone's going to be bugging out to do holiday stuff over the next couple of days here, maybe we'll go ahead and do it right before New Year's and go ahead and push that update out then. Looks like we got a major update for the Akadot persistence.redis plugin finish. That's looking pretty good. I know that Abere, who's been working with us on the Petabridge team here, I know that he's in the process of investigating some issues with the new performance specifications that you contributed. So I know, Gregorius, you've looked into that too. What were those, Gregorius, what were those performance specs we were having trouble with the Redis plugin? Were those those are the new ones that Andrew contributed, right? Well, these are like the horizontal scalability stress tests, right? Yeah. So Abere is in the process of looking into that to see what we can do to get Redis to pass those. So he left me a couple of notes in Gitter that I need to check. I told him I'd do that right after this call today. So we'll take a look at that then. We added a new API overload to the iScheduler that accepts an iRunnable. This is meant for internal use primarily. iRunnable is the interface we use for being able to essentially like all Akka.NET mailboxes implement that. That's what's used by the dispatcher to prevent delegates from being allocated every time we need to go and run a recurring task. Our scheduler uses those internally. It wraps all of the actions that are sent to it into these iRunnable classes. And in the not too distant future, iRunnable is probably also going to implement that iThreadPool work item interface they introduced in .NET Core 3.1, which is what the actual .NET Threadpool uses to run all of its recurring tasks as well. That will probably be done once, I guess it would be either if we start adding dual compilation support for .NET 3. .NET Standard 2.0, and let's say .NET 5 or .NET 6, would probably go ahead and add that overload then. Otherwise, it might have to wait until Akka.NET 2.0. Let's see. We also fixed an issue with Alpaca, and we did a new release of that. Let's see. Fixed a couple of other Akka.persistence bugs. We did an update to akkastreams.kafka. We added, this was, Igor, this was adding support for Event Hub on akkastreams.kafka. Gregorius contributed that, right? You know what? The other, if the other users can't, can someone check the audio on the live YouTube playback? It might, I might not have OBS set up right, and so they might not be able to hear anyone else talking because it's all coming through my device. In which case, I need to fix that and add, let's see, another audio input capture. Let's see. Yeah, that'd be great. I'd appreciate that. Because otherwise that'd make for a very awkward recording. Okay. Let me just take a look at my streaming settings real fast. Audio. Oh, you know what? I do not have desktop audio recorded. So let me go ahead. Igor, have you been able to check it yet? Nope, just Aaron's audible. Okay. Let me go ahead and add that. Let's see. Yeah, it looks like I screwed this up. Well, that would be my fault.
Seems like Andrew was silent.
Dang it. Well, that's all my fault, guys. So let's see. We should have desktop audio coming in now. I just needed to go and change one setting in OBS here. See, this is why I don't run a Twitch stream at the moment. All right. Can you guys hear us better now? If Igor, Gregorius, or someone could speak up.
Yeah, so can anybody hear my voice right now? Let's wait for some delay until it will get to YouTube.
Yeah, no worries. We'll go ahead and wait on that. Well, that's embarrassing. Let's see. All right, so we missed that link to DB part. Got it. Well, we'll go ahead and have a chance to go over that, but I think the audio should be coming in now. I'm seeing it show up on OBS now. Were you guys able to capture that?
I guess someone has to be speaking.
Yeah, Igor, Gregorius or Andrew, were you able to hear? Are either of you guys picking up Igor on the YouTube stream?
So yeah, it seems like.
Yeah, we're good now.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Awesome. So yeah, that was my fault. My OBS settings weren't set up correctly. Okay, let's go back through what we got done. Memory leak with the actor materializer. This was a long-standing bug with Hocon config that Gregorius fixed. So that should be resolved now. I've actually run into this problem with a customer out in the wild, so that's good. We set the ability to automatically set the Akka.cluster version to whatever the assembly version of the software is. So I pull up down here, just out of curiosity. If I go to, let's see, Petabridge, cluster.webcrawler. Let me go ahead and make sure webcrawler is up to date while I'm at it with the latest versions of all the stuff here. Let's see. I think webcrawler should be running with 1.4.13. Yes, it is. So if I go ahead and fetch from Petabridge, I'm just going to go ahead and demo this feature real quick using the latest version of petabridge.command, which also uses Akka.NET 1.3.13 under the covers. So I had to build.command docker real quickly. I'll let that go ahead and run in the background. That shouldn't take too long. But I'll go ahead and demo the app version number stuff real quick. Let's see. We released Akka.NET 1.4.13, and we also fixed that socket bug, and that was part of 1.4.13.2, if I recall correctly. That was that UDP error you fixed, Gregorius?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that's all done now. Let's see.
To be honest, that's actually an error. The original Scala code actually have that error too. So
Oh, wow.
Oh,
yeah.
Well, it goes to show you how good our port is. We port the mistakes as well as the good stuff.
Mhm.
All right. So we got that done. I need to finish reviewing this. This is kind of so basically we implemented the new all events query to the Akka. Well, actually, we added all events and we fixed the persistence IDs queries for SQL Server. And I haven't reviewed this yet. So I'll review that today, and we'll do a new release of Akka.persistence.sql today. Because this will help reduce the memory footprint for that sort of stuff. So we should take care of that sooner rather than later. So that's on my to-do list still. Let's see. A couple of other items that are still outstanding here. Gregorius, I know you've been working on cleaning up this Akka.cluster.metrics bug. Let's see. I've got a bunch of stuff I still need to review, including the split brain resolver here. The thing I'm really happy to report on is an issue that both Andrew and I have been chasing down, which is the Akka.remote. Not just its performance, but also the amount of idle CPU that it consumes. So if I go and take a look at some of our pull requests that we merged in here, let's see, I think this is the first one. And this is the new one here. So this is using WebCrawler. So we've had reports since Akka.NET 1.4 first went live that idle CPU consumption has been a lot higher for nodes that are running inside an Akka.NET cluster. And that's been caused primarily by how we've been using .NET's scheduler inside the batching system for Akka.remote. And so you can see here, these are some of the performance numbers that we have with Akka.NET 1.4.13, so the current version right now. These are some of the new numbers that we have as a result of merging this pull request in. This is available, by the way, in the current Akka.NET Nightlies, this patch, where basically we moved all the scheduling off of .NET's scheduler and onto Akka.NET's. And that reduced the idle CPU utilization by around 50% right here. So it should be using a lot less cycles many fewer cycles in the background than it did before. However, this additional pull request I just sent in last night, about a day ago, this should be an even more significant improvement because we're not using the scheduler at all anymore going forward. On top of that, this change is going to allow the batching system to automatically scale up and down with workload. So the performance numbers so if I go ahead and run the performance numbers right now, in fact, I actually think I have some right here. This is from earlier. Let me scroll up a bit. So these are the batching numbers I produced right after I rebooted my computer earlier today. The current Akka.NET batching system that's available in Akka.NET 1.4.13 does about 2,000 messages per second at extremely low volumes. And that's because we're mostly relying on .NET's scheduler to go ahead and push messages out of the pipeline once every 40 milliseconds. Well, there's two problems with that. One is .NET's scheduler slips in terms of its clock time a lot. So it's actually running much slower than 40 milliseconds typically. That's one of the reasons also why I suspect we had those buffer errors that we were discussing, Andrew, is that we're actually not draining the outbound socket until it gets nearly full, and then we try transmitting that all in one go. And I think that's because of essentially the fact that we're not flushing as frequently as we think we are under Akka.NET 1.4. So now that throughput is at about 103,000 messages per second. You could ignore this. This was Dropbox starting up in the background right after my computer restarted. So that's why this number is lower than it should be. But these are the numbers I usually expect on kind of a busy system using my hardware that I'm running on. Around 190,000 messages per second is kind of the mean here for how quickly we can send string encoded messages over the wire using Akka.remote. And we've tried a number of other things to speed this up. I played around with actually my own fork of .NET, where we're able to avoid allocating task completion sources for everything. I just used a version further down here called SpanNetty, which is all written using system.memory primitives. And that was, we've been trying to use that to go ahead and optimize performance as well. But we haven't really been able to really break out of this sort of band of around 190,000 messages per second. We think that's because we've actually optimized to the extent that it was the bottleneck before, all of the write workloads by using this batching system. So we can't really get that much faster without on the right side of the equation. We think the bottlenecks at this rate are either inside the read side, or it's inside the serialization system, or potentially even the Akka.NET remoting actors. We're planning on addressing all the remoting actor designs as part of our Artery implementation for Akka.NET 1.5, so we're going to have a chance to deal with that then. But speeding up the serialization system or speeding up the read side is going to require a little bit more creativity than speeding up the write side is. So these are some of the things we've been working on. This will be a big part of the Akka.NET 1.4 release. Akka.Remote should be much faster. It should be much more reliable across a wider range of workloads because Akka.Remote's batching system now adapts dynamically to your workload, whether it's really light or whether it's really heavy. When your workload is really light, Akka.Remote's going to flush more frequently, which means the amount of time your messages spends waiting in the wire is going to go down. In a really busy system, Akka.Remote's going to be able to batch groups of messages that all get written in small bursts together into a single flush operation, which will ultimately help improve throughput. So that's one of the things we have to look forward to in this release. I think my web crawler build is finished, so I should be able to demo this new feature in Akka.NET 1.4.13. Let me go ahead and spin that up. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and connect. You know what? I didn't push the version of... Let me go ahead and do this. I don't think I pushed the version of petabridge.command that actually adds the version to the table here. So yeah, so if I take a look here... Nope, looks like I'm going to have to do this demo again later. I do not have the updated version of that inside my web crawler cluster. So that was a bust. But wouldn't be a compelling presentation without at least one failed demo. Right, guys?
Oh, yeah. True story.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So now in terms of what we haven't gotten around to yet, in terms of all the other things here... let's see. We've got a couple of issues reported by end users that haven't been addressed yet. This one I can move to in progress. We haven't gotten around to doing that yet. And there's a whole bunch of community stuff that hasn't been done yet either. This is another one, by the way, that's in review. We're in the process of adding support for, by the way, this is also in review now as well. So that's actually looking better. This is also in review. Okay, that should do it. This I technically think is done, actually, that one. And this one is also in review. So one of the other things that we've done is we are in the process of getting Akka.NET's build chain to target .NET 5, primarily because we had this request from a user to make it so the multi-node test runner could effectively run Akka.NET binaries that were compiled against the .NET 5 target. Naturally, that requires having a .NET 5 version of the multi-node test runner executable. So we are in the process of, I think Abera is working on this. Pull this up here. Here we go. We're in the process of getting this up and running. I think where Abera is at with it is he found one actual bug in Akka distributed data right here. So he's going to go fix that. But otherwise, we're just waiting on an update to Incrementalist, which is the little tool we use for computing Based on every single commit, we can go ahead and do a diff against the feature branch or the development branch that we're targeting, figure out which parts of the project need to be run, and we only compile and run tests against that small sort of that affected area of the project and all the area's dependencies as well. So we use a combination of Roslyn and libgit2 to compute this. We need to release a .NET 5 version of Incrementalist, otherwise we can't run on Linux. That's why this is failing right now. And I was getting ready to push that release right before this call. So that's all staged and ready to go right here. In fact, I can go ahead and merge that in right now and let that run. So that's another thing that's kind of in progress. So we have a lot more things that are wrapping up. However, there's also a fair number of things that we did not even start on as part of this sprint. Probably the biggest one is we did not get our akka.dependency injection stuff done. So this needs to be done basically over the holiday / by akka.net 1.4.15 probably. Akka management. Aaron needs to create a repository here. So that's a big one that we need to do. I think Ishmael's already written a lot of that code. It's sitting in one of his personal repositories. We just need to set one up for him to port to. Let's see. Other stuff. Let's talk about akka.net 1.5. So Gregorius, I wanted to ask real quickly about the artery stuff that you've been working on.
Mm-hmm.
I know this is obviously a back burner issue compared to some of the bugs that you've been working on. But where are we at with this? I know it's still not compiling just yet. I know that Andrew's reviewed it. But where all do you need help with this?
A lot. I mean, it's only like half ported right now.
Okay, so there's a lot more code that we still need to bring over.
Yeah. It's not done yet. It's not even close.
Well, no worries. Well, we'll make some time for
problem is-
for that as part of the next sprint after this one. I
Okay.
know artery is very complicated in terms of all the stuff that it touches, so no worries there.
Yeah, problem is it's not only the artery code itself, but I had to actually port some of the Java codes as well, like byte buffer and all that.
Oh, gotcha. Some of the streaming code.
Yeah, well, the internal of Java.
Yep, got it. Well, that's a big project.
Hmm.
All right. Well, we'll go ahead and allocate some time in the next sprint for working on this too. So that way we can go ahead and keep incrementally stepping towards this and try to get ready for that akka.net 1.5 milestone by Q2 of next year. But that looks good. The other area that we still need to do some work on is our community stuff, which I wanted to spend a bit of time talking about today. So if I go and take a look actually at some of our, here we go. I've got a little project down here, our akka.net open source community standards. This is a big project that I'm pretty invested in terms of from a long-term thinking point of view. The goal really behind this sort of community standards project is this is basically about trying to institutionalize the knowledge you need to be able to do releases and do pull requests against akka.net. That way, my kind of goal here is to expand the number of people who can contribute to the project. And when I say can, I mean like they feel confident contributing to the project. Not necessarily that they, obviously open source doesn't require anybody's permission, right? But I want to go ahead and basically try to make more people feel confident about how to contribute to the project. And I want to ultimately kind of remove myself as a bottleneck when it comes to reviewing work and being able to sort of decide what's an acceptable change and what isn't. So a lot of what I'm going to try to document here is some of the standards that we've historically practiced with respect to things like version tolerance, having migration paths so that way users don't get stranded. One of the things that a lot of open source projects do is they don't really invest the time into the auxiliary parts of the project, meaning like how do we safely migrate users from one version to another? And that's like Python 3ing yourself over and over again. Sometimes the changes aren't all that painful. Like, for instance, when I upgraded to Span Netty earlier today, I had to make, I don't know, maybe 30 or 40 very minor API changes, and that took me all of like 20 minutes to go and do. But when there's more subtle issues, such as changing the serialization format around, which might cause you to not be able to read years worth of data if you're using Akka.persistence, obviously that's a huge problem, and it really undermines the trust that users have in the open source project itself, because people are willing to tolerate, let's say, inconveniences and breaking changes if it's ultimately in the long service of their goals long term. But if you do those things because you just don't want to put forth the effort in order to make that happen in the project, that makes things unpredictable. And it sort of spooks users in the grand scheme of things. It's one of the reasons why Microsoft is such a trusted figure in the .NET community, is they're very good about setting really clear expectations with their users about here's what you can expect from version to version. And they go through a lot of trouble to try to make sure that that is observed by all the development teams. We've historically followed that type of standard in the Akka.NET project too. I helped a user last year, or no, it was, I guess, yeah, last year, upgrade from Akka.NET 1.06 to Akka.NET 1.3. Either 14 or 15. And they didn't have to change a single line of code or configuration, even though there were a ton of internal changes under the covers inside Akka.NET as part of that. That's a really high standard to aspire to, and that's the sort of thing we should try to do as often as we can. However, being able to allow an organization to do that effectively requires documenting sort of what are the procedures we use for doing this. A really good example of where we actually do a pretty good job with this today is if I go to our community page in the Akka.NET website, our whole page around approving public API changes. Now, the actual process of checking in an API approval file is somewhat counterintuitive, but this makes the process of essentially letting users know how their change affected the MSIL that's generated when they added that new optional parameter or whatever, allows us to be very explicit about managing the API surface area. Doing this hundreds of times a year and making sure that the API is being managed in a very deliberate manner, which usually means like an extend-only design, is one of the things that allows us to have these smooth upgrade paths. There's more areas where we can and should try to do this. A good example, explicitly versioning our wire formats, which we do with Protobuf, is another area where we can achieve these types of benefits as well. And this ultimately helps make Akka.NET a trusted technology in our space by having years and years and years of doing a good job observing these types of really high standards for letting people roll forward their Akka.NET version without having to be worried about corrupting all their data or not being able to, or having to take their cluster down before they deploy and so forth. So these are some of the things that we're really going to try to institutionalize here. And, you know, our standards obviously should evolve with the times. Good example, you know, the whole .NET ecosystem releases new versions a lot more frequently, and they don't guarantee lifetime support for all of them the same way that they used to. So that might be an example of an area where we might need to evolve our standards some. We're pretty conservative about a lot of that right now because we tend to support users in a lot of industries that are pretty conservative, such as manufacturing and finance and healthcare. Those would be some examples there. So these are things that obviously should be open to being evolved over a period of time, but we should at least document what they are. And that's a project that I've had on my to-do list for a couple of months now, and I haven't made very much progress. The only thing we really have done so far, so if I scroll up here, is since our last public meeting, we went ahead and we added support for GitHub discussions of the main Akka.NET repository. I actually went and requested beta access to this as a result of all of the well, actually, it was a request in our last community stand-up that we did, where someone mentioned that Gitter chat is great and all, but it's really difficult to keep track of sort of long-running discussions in there. And I want to have a place where I can get some Q&A or show some things off that's a little bit more persistent. And that's exactly what the Akka.net sort of a discussion board is kind of meant to be inside our repository here. So far, it hasn't been used all that much. We probably need to do some more to direct people to it. But that being said, I'm very glad that we have it. I'm going to go ahead and embed our discussion video from today in here, along with some of our meeting minutes as well. So that's kind of the overview of what we've done so far and where we're going to be going. So I'll go ahead and say for Akka.net 1.5, allocate time for artery port. Next sprint. We talked about the institutionalization of knowledge. We just covered kind of some of these things here. I guess the last thing I want to go ahead and add is petabridge.command update to support app version in cluster commands. A couple of other little community things I want to touch on as far as some additional things that Petabridge is working on behind the scenes that doesn't directly relate to the Akka.net code base. We've been going through and making some major updates to Phobos, which is our APM software for Akka.net that does tracing and metrics for all your clusters. We've been doing some major updates there during the same sprint period. We also released a big Datadog tutorial. If I go and pull that up real quick. Yeah, if I go and click on documentation, we have a bunch of new tutorials here that can kind of show you some of the traces that Phobos will go ahead and produce for different scenarios, like if you're using distributed pub sub or request response. And then we also went ahead and wrote a fairly detailed tutorial about how to connect Akka.net to Datadog using Phobos under the covers. That's something that we've spent a lot of time working on. The other big thing that we're in the process of working on right now is, and I expect to have this done in early January, is our clustering course. So we haven't promoted this very much. We actually published this last year in sort of mid-2019. We haven't really promoted it. But this is our sort of equivalent of Akka.net Bootcamp, and it's all about how to work with Akka.cluster, Kubernetes, and Docker. There's a chapter on it about using Phobos at the very end. But mostly this course is about kind of learning how to operationalize Akka.net for continuous deployment. This is actually the approach that we're kind of using here at Petabridge with our SDK bin service. We're hosting it all inside a Kubernetes cluster and AKS. We're in the process of getting ready to roll out a bunch of services that use Akka.cluster and use Akka streams behind the scenes for doing all sorts of things. This sample's a little bit out of date right now. It's targeting Akka.net 1.3 still. It's got some kind of older methodologies for working with Kubernetes. We're going to try to get this all updated to run on the latest version of Akka.net and using all the best practices for working with Kubernetes and Docker. And this is all free. Of course, you can just go to petabridge.com/cluster and start playing around with it if you want. But we're going to have an updated version of this ready to go by hopefully the second or third week of January this year. And we're going to be promoting that quite heavily on our social media and everything else. So hopefully this will be a good resource for some of our users who want to go and learn how Akka.net works and how to use it inside a cluster. We've also, I think Gregorius took care of this a little while ago. Beginning of November. We've updated Akka.net Bootcamp to run everything on top of .NET Core 3.1 here. So we'll probably be promoting and expanding this as well, including doing things like updating some of our actual written units and chapters. So we'll be taking care of a little bit of that. But anyway, we're trying to go through and do a big pass of kind of modernizing a lot of our tutorial and introductory content. One of the really common pieces of feedback we've gotten from users is that there's still not enough material on how to use certain parts of Akka.net. In particular, I think Akka.persistence and Akka.streams are probably the two that we hear most often. So we're going to try to do more to address that over the course of the next few quarters. And we're going to try to publish some updates to our existing courses and maybe even do some new ones while we're at it. So that's some of the stuff that we have coming down the pipeline there. So I'll go ahead and say content tutorial updates. Now, as far as the next sprint after this one goes, I think we're probably going to go ahead and spend a little bit more time focusing on some more Akka.NET 1.4 issues. We should start looking at wrapping up Akka.NET 1.4's sort of life cycle, though, and moving on to Akka.NET 1.5. I think maybe one or two more Akka.NET 1.4 sprints is probably about as much as we should manage before we move on to trying to concentrate on Akka.NET 1.5. That kind of feels right to me in terms of making sure we hit that release deadline that we mentioned in our last public meeting a month ago. I want to take the temperature of the room real quick, though. Andrew, Gregorius, Igor, how do you feel about shifting gears after like one or two more sprints to focusing exclusively on Akka.NET 1.5?
Well, it sounds reasonable to me. It's time to bring some new stuff and make some fun.
Yeah, we still need to put together like a detailed milestone for Akka.NET 1.5. That we should probably we should make it. You know what? By the next meeting, have Akka.NET 1.5 milestone to review. I'll go ahead and assign that to myself. So by the time we do our next public meeting, which I guess will be, let's see, not January 6th. It'll be January 20th. So I'll do 1/20/2021. We'll go ahead and have that ready to go. We should have that ready to discuss, go through it publicly, and then we should commit to it and actually start implementation, I think, would probably be a good place to be. Andrew, Gregorius, how does that sound?
Sounds good.
Yeah?
Okay, so Andrew is already offline.
Oh, he's offline. Whoops. Well, good thing I didn't. Good thing we're not waiting on him. Well, I think that'll go ahead and do it for today's meeting. Does anyone have anything else they want to bring up or discuss before we adjourn today?
No, I'm good.
Not too much.
Nope. All right.
Merry Christmas to everyone.
You know what else I'm going to do? Add OBS checklist for live meetings. That way I don't make sure we don't lose our audio next time. All right. Well, to everyone who attended this live today or is watching the recap, thank you very much for following us. We really appreciate it. Hope you all have a safe holiday season and a Merry Christmas. And we'll see you in 2021. All right. Take care. Okay, I just ended the live stream.